อกุลต่ออัลโลกอิสราเอลจะตามเยลูคุนามีถึงได้บางช่วยมาโจร่วมในขนมพิธีcáchพิธีซาสบายยังมีการกัดตุ้มเมตนองไมกระหอมได้มีโลกเมทวีอันตรจิตโลกNicholas Kunjian. Did I get your last name right? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I have the honor to present to you a discourse on the Khmer Rouge Tribunal that have the international co-prosecutor for the extraordinary chambers in the court of Cambodia, and moderated by His Excellency Chang Song. And first of all, I would like to thank you all for coming to the Cambodian Association of America, CAA, and we have a good crowd tonight, and I apologize for a little bit of the climate here. It's a little bit hot, but I think that we all can survive because we can survive the Khmer Rouge, right? Yeah. So we can survive this, definitely. All right. Without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the co-sponsors for this event tonight, and I'm going to read their names and their representatives. So first of all, Cambodia Town Inc. is the Pasinchanu Shannon, right there. And second is Cambodian Association of America, and myself representing, and I have one of my board members here, Mr. Council Kuhn, attending the event tonight. I have Khmer Girl in Action, Lien Chun. I know who break the crowd, right? Alright. Next is the Mitopum Khmer Spirit, Sochiet Kuch. Executive Director, are you here? He's not here. Alright. Pacific Asian Counseling Services, Ms. Mariko Kwan. United Cambodian Community Inc., Ms. Sarah Paulin. I have Pacific Asian Consortium in Employment, Dr. Sawatana Sukhom. Are you here? I don't see him. I have a Cambodian American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Edward Tan, President. I have Applied Social Research Institute of Cambodia Inc., Dr. Lekhana Nu, Executive Director. I have Long Beach, Phnom Penh Sister City, Monon Romnates, President. And I have Green Bijuan Foundation, Nancy Lee, President and Founder. Also, I have a lot of Cambodian community leaders here tonight, and I won't be able to recognize all you all, and apologize for that. I couldn't recognize you by name, but please be known that all the community leaders and interested in Cambodian communities are here. So thank you all very much. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our moderator, His Excellency Chang Song. Mr. Chang Song is the one of the former Cambodian who survived the Khmer Rouge, and also he is the former Minister of Information in Cambodia in the Republicans regime that fights the Khmer Rouge. So without further ado, can you please come here and introduce our international co-prosecutors. Thank you. You want to sit down? Okay.
You were sitting up, I'm sitting up.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think today is the extraordinary day in the sense that we have waited for over 35 years. We have waited for so long for this day. When on the 27th of August, the two masterminders Khmer Rouge, Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, was sentenced to life imprisonment by the International Court in Cambodia, in short ECCC. Now, it's important to note that the person who made it possible for that prosecution is here today with us. It's very important, a great honor for us Cambodians, although not everybody is here, but hopefully you represent everybody else in Long Beach and in Southern California. And the man today is here, is Mr. Nicolas Khom Chien. Please welcome. No, his name Khom Chien is a median name, and it's close to Cambodian, like Kung Chien. It's Khom Chien, right? Khom Chien. It's very good name. So, he is the international prosecutor at the Extraordinary Chambers of the Courts of Cambodia, which is known as the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. He was here as appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he took up his position in Phnom Penh in October last year, just before the closing argument in the trial on Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan. So you have here is a very important person to make this prosecution possible. It's historical and, as pointed out, extraordinary for the Cambodian history. Mr. Khom Chien has a long career in international criminal laws, and it's very long to go on his extraordinary career in the legal profession. Very distinguished personality. He even prosecuted Charles Taylor, President Charles Taylor of Liberia. So it's the former president of Liberia, who is the first convicted person in International Criminal Tribunal for crimes committed while he was a head of state. Mr. Khom Chien has handled case and advice on litigation for crimes against humanity, case in Bosnia, Timor, Darfur, Syria, Lebanon, Guatemala, Ivory Coast, Iraq, and now Cambodia. Prior to his career in international law, Mr. Khom Chien was a deputy district attorney for Los Angeles County for almost 20 years. So we should be here very pleased to welcome him here home. This is home in Southern California. Without further ado, I'd like to invite him to address you. And I submit first of all that we do not have complete agreement on the outcome of the trial of the Khmer Rouge. But let me point out all that it is a success nonetheless. It is when hundreds of thousands of Cambodians participate in the court, which is looked upon as the largest participation in criminal proceeding on international level. It's very important that the process continue. Also like Professor Nu, Lieutenant Nu, who is responsible to bring up the victims of the Khmer Rouge atrocity to the court. I think that role will be played increasingly by the Cambodians in the future generations to come. I don't know how to handle this moderation. I hope you're not going to moderate. So I'd like to invite Mr. Kumjin, Nicola Kumjin. Yeah, I'm going to sit here.
You want to see it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here tonight and get a chance to meet all of you, because you're Cambodians and those are the people that we, all of the staff of the ECCC, are working with, and because you're also my fellow Los Angelinos, LA County people. I hope that tonight is not just a lecture, but a dialogue. I know there are many people in the audience that have opinions and views on the court, and all are welcome. Certainly there are many people that have criticisms of the court, and you're welcome to express those opinions and what you hope to see the court do in the future, how we can improve. So I don't know how many of you, I'm sure many of you know about the court, and forgive me if I begin with some basics about how the ECC was established. As you know, the Khmer Rouge regime lasted 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days, from the 17th of April 1975 to the 6th of January 1979. It was not until 1997 that the co-prime ministers of Cambodia at the time, Prince Renirat and Hun Sen, together wrote to the United Nations and requested assistance in establishing a court to try the leaders of the Khmer Rouge. Very unfortunately, it took many years for the negotiations of the court to proceed and for the court to actually be established. Originally, the UN expert panel proposed a court outside of Cambodia, and then there were negotiations between the government and the United Nations. At one point, this one's better? At one point, the UN decided to break off negotiations, and they were going to just give up on the court. But the General Assembly of the United Nations told the Secretary General and his representatives, no, go back and finish the negotiations. So the court that was eventually, sorry for the microphone, the court that was eventually established had some special, perhaps I could, would it work for me just to speak? Okay, let's try this one. So the court that was eventually established with certain rules. It was very important to the government of Cambodia that the court be in Cambodia and based within the legal system of Cambodia. So this is not the same kind of court structure that was established for Yugoslavia and Rwanda. After the conflicts in Yugoslavia and Rwanda, in 1993, the Security Council set up a court to judge. They set up a court to judge the crimes, to try the crimes in the former Yugoslavia. And then, And then in 1994, they set up a court to judge the crimes in Rwanda. But those courts were all international, and they both were established in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So very far from the people who had suffered from the crimes and who were affected.
ហាងលក់ដំណាំមីមូសា Nursery នៅ East LA មីមូសា Nursery យើងខ្ញុំមានលក់ដំណាំហូបផ្លែស្រុកយើងគ្រប់ប្រភេទដូចជាដើមទៀបខ្នោទម្លាប់ស្រកានាគល្មុតមង្ឃុតព្រមទាំងដើមក្រូចគ្រប់មុខយើងក៏មានដើមមៀននិងដើមគូលែនសាច់ច្រើនផ្អែមឆ្ងាញ់ពិសាមិនតែប៉ុណ្ណោះយើងមានដើមល្ហុងដើមកន្ទឹមដើមស្វាយដើមត្របែកដើមក្រូចសើចលាក់និងលាក់មីមូសាក៏មានដើមផ្កាចម្ប៉ាណាគ្រីនិងចំបៃក្លិនក្រអូបឈ្ងុយឈ្ងប់រាល់ពេលរាត្រីហើយមានដើមផ្សេងទៀតជាច្រើនរាប់មិនអស់មីមូសា Nursery មានទីតាំង2កន្លែងមួយនៅ Santa Ana ហើយមួយទៀតនៅ East LA តម្លៃថោកសមរម្យព័ត៌មានបន្ថែមសូមអញ្ជើញតាក់ទងទូរស័ព្ទលេខ323 722 4543
But the United Nations wanted to make sure that the court was not only Cambodian judges or controlled by the Cambodian government, and they also recognized that the legal system in Cambodia, after the Khmer Rouge period, and even up to today, is still very much in development. It's still learning, it's behind. So the idea was to mix international experts, international judges and prosecutors, and Cambodian judges and prosecutors. So at the court now, there are 2 prosecutors. I'm the international prosecutor, and Ms. Jian Liang is my national co-prosecutor. There also are 2 investigating judges, an international and a national. And the chambers of judges that decide on the trial are mixed. For the trial, there are 2 internationals and 3 Cambodians. And for the Supreme Court, there are 4 Cambodians and 3 internationals. But also the UN insisted on a rule to make sure that the court would remain independent of any government control, or to try to do that by saying that certain decisions, if there's a disagreement, for example, between me and my co-prosecutor, that then goes to another chamber of judges, which are 3 Cambodians and 2 internationals. To reach a decision, it requires not 3 of 5, but 4 of 5. It requires what they call a supermajority. So one side or the other, if they were divided that way, the nationals or internationals cannot make a decision. They have to reach an agreement. If they don't reach an agreement, then the rules say that the case will go on or the investigation will go on. So that's how it was set up. Now, the court started only working. The first internationals arrived in 2006. It took that long for it to actually get up and running. And it took a whole another year to agree on the rules of procedure that would be used at the court. Once these were established, the court is now first put on trial Doi, the commandant, the leader of Tul Slang prison, S21 in Phnom Penh, where about 16,000 people were brought to that prison and killed, most of them badly tortured for weeks or months before they were killed. He went to trial, his trial is completed, and he went to, the appeal is finished. At the trial, the judges gave him something like 32 years, but on appeal, the appeal chamber changed that verdict, the sentence, to life imprisonment. So he was convicted of various crimes against humanity for the killings and tortures that happened at Tul Slang and given life imprisonment. And he's now in an ordinary provincial Cambodian prison. Of course, the International Committee of the Red Cross has viewed his prison to make sure it complies with international standards, but he's there with other prisoners, other Cambodians in an ordinary prison. The second case, what's called Case 2, was the case really at the heart of what happened in the Khmer Rouge regime. Of course, many of those who we'd like to try, those most responsible, some of them have died, have passed away. Pol Pot, of course, died under some circumstances after being arrested by Tam Mok. Tam Mok himself died just a week after the court started operating. He was brought into custody and he died just a week after the court started operating. And the original Case 2 investigation, there were 4 individuals charged. Nun Chia, brother number 2, he was the deputy to Pol Pot, the second in the regime. There was Ieng Sary, who was the foreign minister of the regime. There was Khieu Samphan. Khieu Samphan, many of you, of course the older people would all remember Khieu Samphan, and he was the public face of the Khmer Rouge. I remember back in the 1970s when what little we knew as we were reading the New York Times or other articles, newspapers about Cambodia, the name you kept hearing was Khieu Samphan, and he was viewed by many people as, oh, he's a moderate member of the Khmer Rouge. And then Ieng Sary's wife was also, Ieng Tary, she also was charged. Unfortunately, before the trial, it was found, the judges determined that Ieng Sary's wife, Ieng Tary, had dementia. She has Alzheimer's disease, and she was removed from the case because under all international legal standards, you can't try someone who's incompetent, who doesn't know what's going on. She was incapable of participating. And she's currently in very, very bad health in Cambodia and on release. Ieng Sary died last year in 2013 as the trial was reaching, the first part of the trial was reaching an end. So we were left with Nun Chia, brother number 2, and Khieu Samphan, the former head of state. 2 very, very important figures in the Khmer Rouge regime. Now before this case started, the judges made a decision to try to sever the case and have a trial on only a part of the charges first. This was a decision this was something the judges came up with, and the reason for it is certainly logical. They were concerned that because of the age of the accused persons, that they would die before judgment was reached, as happened with Milosevic. If you remember Slobodan Milosevic, the former head of Yugoslavia, was on trial in The Hague for 4 years, and just as his trial was about to end, he died. So no judgment was ever reached. So they made a decision to sever the case. They originally decided to only include charges related to the forced transfer of population, the evacuation of Phnom Penh in April 1975, and then transfers, as many of you know about, where later in 1975 and into 1976, even all the way into 77, the Khmer Rouge regime transferred people from different parts of Cambodia, generally to the northwest, where they thought there was the rice farming heartland, but they transferred them from the southwest, from the east to the northwest in horrible conditions, packed on trains like animals. And for these crimes, for what happened, forced transfer itself is a crime against humanity, but also they were tried for crimes that occurred in those forced transfers. Hundreds were killed in the evacuation of Phnom Penh, and also hundreds of thousands in the transfers from one area of Cambodia to another. So these crimes were part of the trial. And at the towards the end of the trial, they also agreed to the prosecution request to add a massacre of former Lon Nol soldiers and officials at Tulpo Tre. This happened in April 1975. On the scale of everything that happened in Cambodia, it wasn't so large. It was a massacre of about 250 people, the judges found in the judgment, on one day in April 1975. The prosecution had asked them to also at least add S21, the security center right in Phnom Penh that was so close to the leadership, where also many of the top Khmer Rouge leaders themselves, when they fell out of grace with the regime, were sent to S21 and tortured and killed. But the judges made the decision that that would delay the trial. They wanted to finish at least one trial.
so they finished. We got a judgment on that case just on the 7th of August. And in that judgment, both Q Sampan and Nunchia were convicted of all of the charges related to those forced transfers and for the massacre at Tulpotre. They were convicted of it not because they themselves were there, of course, but because they were part of a regime and they helped make these policies, and they contributed to a criminal enterprise that made all of these crimes possible. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. This was a unanimous decision of all 5 of the judges of the trial chamber. Now that case will be appealed. The defense of course, will appeal, and they've already announced it. We won't actually get their notice where they give the grounds of appeal until later this month, the end of this month. And the whole appeal process in a case complicated like this is likely to take about a year. In that trial, in case 2 of Q Sampan and Nunchia, 92 witnesses testified. There's about 25,000 pages of transcript. There were close to 6,000 documents that were admitted into evidence. But what about all the other crimes? Because when they severed out the other charges, what still remains to be tried are the security centers like S21. And the S21 was one of about 200 security centers around the country, where so many tens, hundreds of thousands were tortured and killed. Also remaining to be tried is the crime that we think is really at the heart of the policies of the Khmer Rouge, and that is enslavement. It's a crime under international law, and it's seen in almost all of the policy of the Khmer Rouge, but very much it's seen in the work cooperatives, where people were taken to work on dam sites, taken to build dikes, various work projects, thousands of people, and worked very long hours, no pay, very little food, thousands starved to death, no medical attention. The crime of enslavement under international law is proven when you show that someone exercised the powers of ownership over another human being and or denied them fundamental rights. Well, this is, I think, at the very heart and the obvious policies of the Khmer Rouge, because what they did is they took away from people, first they outlawed money and any possessions. They took away any possessions. You no longer had a right to choose whether you wanted to work or where you worked or the profession you worked. They prohibited the practice of religion. They even required some individuals, they forced people to marry who didn't even know each other. They sometimes took children away from families to be separately educated, separated families. So all of those fundamental rights that make us humans and are living were denied by a regime which I think wanted to destroy the individual. So that remains to be tried. And also remaining to be tried are genocide charges. Now this is something a little bit complicated, and I want to explain it to you. Genocide is a word we use, most of us in ordinary speech, that has a meaning I think we all understand, a very mass killing, a very large-scale killing of a people. But in international law, it has a more specific technical meaning. And that is certain acts, such as killing, that are committed with a special intent. And that intent has to be to destroy a group in whole or in part. And the group has to be a national, religious, ethnic, or racial group. This was the definition that was agreed on in 1949 when Raphael Lemkin, the person that invented the word genocide, he pushed for many years for there to be a international convention against this and to make this a crime. As he originally proposed it, it would also have included another category a political group. But during the negotiations, that was taken out. The Soviet Union objected to that. They didn't want to have anyone tried because they attacked a class or a political group, political opponents, to have that classified as genocide. So that was removed from the convention. So the jurisprudence from the international courts is clear that unless it's a religious, ethnic, national, or racial group, it's not genocide. It can be the crime of extermination, which is a mass killing. And that is also charged in the case. Also charged in the case is the persecution of Buddhists. That remains to be tried. But the genocide charges are 2 counts, one related to the Cham Muslims, that they were specifically targeted, and secondly to the Vietnamese in Cambodia. Because what the evidence shows is when the Khmer Rouge first took power, they attempted to transfer, and they transferred out thousands of Vietnamese. But then the last 2 years or so of the regime, the policy changed to kill any Vietnamese, and even kill anyone who had any association with Vietnam, including many of the Khmer Rouge leaders that had spent many years in Hanoi and came back to the country after the Khmer Rouge took power, were then killed by the regime because they talked about all these people, Khmer Krom, Khmers who were from Vietnam, or even they were born in Cambodia, but their grandparents were from Vietnam, were suspected. They were called people with Cambodian bodies and Vietnamese heads, or Vietnamese hearts.